Sorry about that. Instead of missiles, of course, we're just going to have them be people. So we're still going to have, historical events like the Soviet Union still exists and so on. And of course, again, the arms race is just really replaced with this weapons race or the gifted race. And so this is where the Centurion incident is really going to happen. So you have a, sudden, um, what do I want to say, stockpile of gifted people. And this is where I'm going to talk about the ranks right now. So, let's talk about ranks of the gifted people. Or I'm just going to call them gifted. So, first off, the most important rank of a gifted is S. And then you go to A, and then B. And then anything below B is considered, in my opinion, inconsequential. And then C, D, and then after D is really nothing. So when we think of an S rank power, we're not talking about catastrophic. In this story, in Gifted, there is no such thing as a catastrophic power. It's really like a fairy tale, really. Like there's no such thing as resurrection. There's no such thing as, laser beams or indestructibility. But in S rank, we will include actually Shirai. Well, the thing is about this ranking system is to show how biased it is and how really it doesn't make sense because you can't rank the powers. Because someone with a really simple power can use it in such a way to get such an advantage out of it that they really can make themselves S rank, even though their power itself really wasn't. So a typical S rank power would be one character that will be introduced. He's a minor character where he can create earthquakes. So that is considered one of the strongest. Of course, on the Richter scale, it's only a 0.5. In this, you also have people that can shoot fire, and the reason why shooting fire is a rank S power because it's not just like a little beam. It's like a lot of fire. If you have the ability on your own with your gift to destroy a building, destroy a structure, destroy almost anything that you touch, that's really considered an S rank ability. Any power that should not and cannot ever be used in public because of how dangerous it is. So you got shooting fire, you got causing earthquakes, you got anything destructive. Like in its own ability, it is only destructive. It is far too dangerous to be used in real life. And then also anything I'd want to put in here is also I would consider a mind power or a psychic power. So the reason why it's S is because if you technically have the ability to control people and manipulate people to get them to do what you want, that is an overpowered power, obviously. So then A rank powers are what I would be considered enhancements. And then combat. And so these are very generic, of course. But so an enhancement or a combat power would be like if you had 4 arms, or if you had, super reflexes in combat. So one guy in combat, he has super reflexes. His ability would be called sleight of hand. That's where an A rank power comes in. Is he has an obvious advantage against other people. It's like you can't really beat him. In a fair fight. It's just, you can't really think of that as fair at all. And so anything that is considered unfair or overpowered would be an A rank. So these are still very dangerous, but they don't destroy. They aren't completely ridiculous like an S rank ability. And then B ranks, they're still good. And so it's still considered an enhancement, but for example, one character's ability is that he has an unusual amount of adrenaline in his body, and he also can activate adrenaline whenever he wants. And so he's still considered, what would be the word? A superior human because he has an ability that can be very helpful, but it's not nearly as good as something like ultimate reflexes. It's only just a little bit stronger than what a human would be. So it makes you superior, it makes you still dangerous, but it doesn't make it unfair. It still has too many drawbacks. So with that guy, obviously adrenaline has its own um, um, what am I trying to say? Has its own downsides. And then a C or D power are pretty much gifts that don't do anything dangerous. You can't so a C power is considered non-lethal. So anything above a C power can still be considered lethal, but again, lethality increases. So S is your ability is so lethal that if you aren't careful, you will easily kill someone. A abilities can kill people pretty easily still, not as easy as S. B, yes, they can kill, but it would be pretty. You can't just do it on accident. You can't be like, ooh, whoops, I slipped, I killed someone. C, on the other hand, it's considered non-lethal because, like, no matter how good if the ability can kill, it would have been a B ability. C is non-lethal, so that means it would be an ability that barely does you anything. If you could fly, that would be considered a C ability. Even though flying is absolutely amazing, it's not in terms of lethality. These ranks are only supposed to determine how dangerous you are as an individual. And then D is barely an ability at all. So barely a gift. So this would be, let's say you had a gift where you can see things in a higher resolution than someone else. Like you have the ability to see more than a mile away. That would be considered a C or a D ability. I'd consider it a D ability in certain cases. Like if you're a normal citizen, you'll barely even recognize you have a gift. If you're a sniper, on the other hand, in the military, that could actually be a pretty good ability. But is the ability in and of itself lethal? No. If you had a sniper, yeah. And that's why this ranking system is so unbalanced. Because, again, your powers really don't make sense on their own. Again, like the zooming in ability, that's not really that good. But if you were a sniper, that would be one of the best gifts you could ever have. And so that's why it's supposed to show the unfairness. So I kind of went on a tangent there. So I gotta speed through this. So, Centurion incident, a whole bunch of S ranks on the Soviet side are discovered to be found on Cuba. So we're up here on Cuba, and the American and the U.S., or at this point the United Nations, they see that there are a bunch of S-rank people here, and they send a bunch of boats with their own S-rank people. So in this one, rather than it being like the threat of nuclear war, and the fear of mutual destruction, the stakes are a little bit less because again, these are just S-rank people. Like they have very good abilities, like a guy that can create earthquakes, but they won't destroy the entire, foundation of the world. So what happens is the United States sends boats full of their S-rank people, and this is going to be the confrontation that will start World War III, because they've both built up these stockpiles of S-rank people, and they're going to have their showdown, right? The only problem though is that right before the showdown happens, all of Cuba, and I mean all of it, just absolutely gets destroyed. The whole entire nation of Cuba as we know it is gone. All the S rank humans, or all the S rank gifteds on both sides are dead. They all completely are wiped out in an instant. And from the ashes rises the Centurion, the first person with powers, and I say powers as in multiple. So Centurion is Roman for obviously a leader of 100. He is called the Centurion because he has, according to legend, over 100 powers, including, of course, invulnerability. So you see where this is going. This is pretty much Godzilla level. He just rises from the ash. He's the one that destroyed Cuba, and he just goes on this killing spree. And for 2 days, for 2 whole days, he destroys almost every single major center. So he hits USA, of course, the East Coast. He hits Europe, pretty much all of it. He hits Asia, most importantly Japan, and Australia. And the reason why is going to be explained, of course, later in the story. So he hits pretty much every single major power in the world. Of course, you can see that I left out South America and Africa because at this point they were not major players. So he's not an alien, obviously, but we really don't know what he is because at this point, this is in 1980. They didn't even have the internet back then. So the whole incident only took 2 days. In it, all these places were hit. Japan is completely wiped out. I mean, sunk just like Cuba. So 2 island nations are gone, Cuba and Japan. So USA East Coast gets hit, Europe gets hit, Asia does as well, and like India and China and everyone. So the death toll is approximately, again, because of the limits of technology, it's approximately 2 billion people are dead in 1980. So that's roughly around 50% of the population. That is huge. This is the modern day Black Plague. So after all this happens, after the 2 days, he is gone. What we know as the story develops and as the story begins is the Protector Nations were formed, which is pretty much the United Nations. The Protector Nations were formed and they took him down. So you got the Protector Nations over here. Never really figured out what their logo is going to be. Something like that, with the world or all that. So they are formed, the Centurion is down, and now the world is completely changed. Not only is half the world dead, there's a global depression. Almost all signs of the communist regime are done. So the Soviet Union is gone. Soviet Union's gone because of the depression, of course. As a result of this, now we have strict laws in place. And finally, now we have a world that's really split into 2 factions. You have the Protector Nations, which is, of course, the world powers, and then you have what's called Shadow Nations, which do not fall under this category. They're not united as you'd think, like the Protector Nations are. Rather, they're just any nation that chose not to side with the Protector Nations when they were formed. And so I've went on a huge spree, and I didn't even go into the characters, but that's okay. We just need to go into the history for now, and I'll make a video later.